Jeff again here, and on this book about understanding America and Americans. And this chapter is about the whole concept of kind of the military, pro-military approach of Americans. This is the one of the topics that ends up causing a lot of divisiveness and a lot of divisions in families and friends and in relationships. Yeah, it's just there are things I've found there are things you don't talk about. And this tends to be one of them. So I'm going to talk about it because this needs to be talked about. Um, but the Americans are kind of funny with the whole military thing. And actually, I want to mention a couple other countries and how I've seen. Again, I've lived overseas for half of my life, and I've seen how other countries work, and I've seen and appreciated how other countries perceive military. And right now, I'm doing this book right now. I said it was started this a decade ago, but I kind of put it on hold for some reasons, and I already mentioned that in the introduction. Go read the preface. Go watch the preface in the introduction here. Um, but here, right now, we are right at this point in time where Putin is attacking Ukraine, and this is a right timing for this chapter, um, because military history. There's a whole military history. I'm going to explain the American kind of approach to military, but it's happening at the same time where we see Putin doing this, attacking, and I'm going to mention how the Americans have kind of dominated in this field or industry, or what do you want to call this thing, um, for the past, I'm going to say the past 100 years. Okay, mainly the past 70 years, but over the past 100 years has taken to place. Um, so the other cultures, I mean, think about the Swiss. The Swiss are a military. The Swiss are kind of the military you don't mess with because they're very defensive. They're very good. They're a very mountainous region, and they've always been, everyone's trained. All the men are trained and they do military, practice and everything. Every year they have to do a little bit of military service. Yeah, I got friends that are for Swiss, so I've gone. I can see the rifles when they go there. They show me their rifles and their chests they have at home, and so they have to go do a little bit of reserves kind of work, if we want to call it reserves, every year for a week or something, and kind of get you back into practice. It's a constant practice. So you always have to be ready in case there's an invasion. And no one's, the Swiss are always known for the history of, protecting their mountains and very, very good at it. And you just don't, when you get into the Swiss mountains, you're dead because they're just better, in their own territory, on their own territory. Very small country, no one messes with them. And that's why they've actually been pretty good at, finding other ways to do other things to make their economy well. It's not just the chocolate and the watches that made them rich, okay? There's other things that make them rich. So I'm not going to, this is not about the Swiss, but I'm just kind of saying that there are some things that we can learn from some other cultures as I begin to come to talk Americans on this topic. Um, the Russians, the military, the Cold War is, everything kind of goes back to the Cold War. The Cold War was, with the communists, and communism is associated with Russians and with Chinese and with Koreans. Okay, I'm going to kind of make three general kind of topics. And yes, this I'm not saying they are that. I'm just saying it's associated with that. And that goes back to the McCarthyism era, which had an influence of Christianity into it. See, all these things kind of mix together. So I do have another chapter about Christianity, but I forgot to say in that one that a lot of things about the whole, I didn't want to say it until this one because it's actually in this one it makes more sense because the military, but the whole Billy Graham era he was actually speaking out against communists. Um, and that's where he got a lot of visibility because of his anti-communists speaking, though he was the preacher who was representing America and he had a heavy influence. But he was very, outspoken against being anti-communist in the 1950s, and he influenced the presidents. at that time, and had influence on the presidents after that for a long, many decades. But it even goes back further, the whole military thing, not just the 1950s, where that's where the Americans actually came onto the scene. Okay, and I'm going to come back to this again, but really that's where the Americans entered onto the scene as beginning to defend their territory that they had been attacked up in Hawaii, okay, um, and the Aleutian Islands up in Alaska. But this whole thing is, and I got I got a one called "When Was America the Last Invasion of America?" I might actually insert that video into here because this will make sense. This actually be kind of a sub chapter of this one because I talked about that, and I don't want to. I actually should talk about that one specifically. I'll insert that as a sub chapter here. Maybe it'll be another chapter. I did another a couple weeks ago. When was America, last invaded its territory? So that's a good one to talk about too. So I'll probably use that here. I won't restate the whole thing again. But the whole military thing goes back to Americans were a revolution, okay? It was a revolution. It was a bloody revolution that was against King George, right? If I remember correctly. Yes, King George. I remember. I think it was the third. I can't remember which one. I have to go back. This has been 30 years since I've studied this. Okay, so I'm not going back and redoing all my things. I'm not trying to make this book a thing where I go back and say the exact statement and say it in some book and thing. I just point to references and say go read it. But it was a revolution against the king, especially with taxes that were imposed on the immigrants to this new world. And they didn't see themselves as immigrants, but they were, because they were immigrants to another territory, so that they were taking over the territory without knowing and understanding they were taking over someone else's territory. They thought they were just, we found some more land and we're going to take it and do it. Oh, there happen to be some people there. Well, we'll get rid of them. That's how it was approached. Yes, they did exterminate a lot of the American Indians that were already there, okay? But they were just seen as substandard kind of thing. See, that shows that this whole feeling of superiority and inferiority existed way before Adolf Hitler. It did exist in other Europeans before Adolf Hitler, okay? So you got to take that into account. This trait was not just in Germany, and it's existed elsewhere in other cultures too. So even in Africa. But the thing here is so what happens? You had a lot of these different groups come into colonies. They created colonies. 13 of them at the beginning. They were progressively growing and progressively being created for different reasons. People came for different reasons. But what happened is the colonies decided at one point they were able to kind of align themselves and get a consensus to get everyone to kind of go against the king, at least in that point in time in the late 1700s. In the 1770s, there was a whole thing of that 1750s, 60s and stuff, and then finally the 1770s and the 1780s. And so you get the whole Declaration of Independence in 1776, and then 1781, 81 with the Constitution, if I can remember correctly, the date here. Again, it's been 30 years since I've sat in a history class. So the dates I got to think here. I got to remember. I'm not looking up from Google before I do this. So I'm not trying to go and do a little document analysis for every single point here because I would never get the book done. I'm just getting the book out, and if I got a couple of mistakes, I'll go read it and make a comment on it and the thing. But I'm not looking it up right now. I'm being honest here. I'm just coming from my memory, okay, pure memory here, with a minimal outline. So this whole thing grew out of the whole part of it was based on the tea, the import, a lot of the taxes on the tea. The Americans didn't want to have the Americans, the colonies in America did not want to be taxed by the government. They considered it a foreign government, where it's not quite a foreign government because it's actually the mother country, right? So it still is the mother country back then. But they declared, that we want to go to war, and so this whole kind of revolution And now George Washington came out and had that whole period of time right there. And there were a lot of generals in the beginning, which happens. A lot of the countries have generals too. Generals are kind of leading the thing. They're the visionaries. They're the ones that defending the country and all that. But the whole so I was in the 1770s, 80s, 90s. Okay, that whole period of time right there. And then kind of the next time that you get the whole kind of Louisiana Purchase, the expansion of the United States. After the Americans declared themselves as a separate nation. It's a federation of states rather than being a single state, which is very different than other places. Um, There's a lot of other things we'll talk about in other chapters here. But the whole America, though, did it was fighting a war on its own continent for a while, or its own territory, or I don't want to call it territory because it was kind of a bunch of purchases or invasions of the parts of the entire continent. So the Louisiana Purchase was French, so they got it from the French. Um, so that extended the territory larger, and then going out and just invading the rest of the territory, the whole cowboy kind of era. So, and getting out to finally out to California with the gold rush and all that, and the Oregon Trail, going out from Ohio out to Oregon. So that gets bringing the whole kind of Lewis and Clark kind of thing with Pocahontas. I mean, you kind of have to do a little historical digging to kind of see all these things, and that's where Disney movies help us a little bit to get to want to learn history, right? Because they do Disney films out of this to kind of make it interesting for us, right? And the whole reason of going out west and protecting yourself, the whole cowboy era, because this brings into, see, I'm talking here in the military. I haven't talked about the internal police and cowboy area. That's a whole nother chapter here. Okay, I'm getting us whetting our appetite for this one. But the military aspect is interesting because this the I'm saying military versus police. It's a different thing. It's really a different thing, and there's different vision of this. There's different actually perspective of this, and I want to make this clear because I need to talk about the police in the different chapter, which I'll talk about the cowboy thing. Okay, the whole thing. I'm going to talk about that as a separate chapter. This one's about the military itself. Okay, an old perspective of military, and and the Americans. What has happened over there? It was all kind of, no, we're defending ourselves. It's a militia bearing arms. The Second Amendment to the Constitution. We have the right to bear arms. Um, and I think Americans don't quite understand that. They don't quite read that amendment clear enough, or some say they do. Yeah, but I think a lot of Americans, they just believe what others say, tell them. But they actually don't know what Second Amendment says actually, and have memorized and actually understand the historical context in which that was written, because that's a really important thing to understand the historical context in which something is written, not just believe what others say about their interpretation of it. Okay, I don't tend to like to want to believe what others just tell me. I want to study that myself and do enough research to say that I'm well educated on that topic. I usually don't like to talk about things I don't know that well. Um, at least not sufficiently to be not feel stupid about it. Okay, um, or seem stupid. The that whole that was still kind of on its own territory, dealing with territory, the whole um, the Indian Territory invasion, which it was an invasion. I'll say that, and I'll say that a lot of things that we learned in Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts, as like we were kind of getting on with the Indians, is like I see that now as kind of like it's a bunch of marketing. It's a bunch of marketing, make us feel good marketing, because I see now what we did to the Indians in the past. And I'll say we now because I feel ashamed for it. Um, I feel ashamed about it because I was a Cub Scout, yeah, and I started Boy Scouts when I was a kid, but I didn't stay with it, because we moved along and did the other things. But I had a lot of friends that are they're really into the Cub Scout, Boy Scout kind of thing and all that. But um, that whole um, then becoming military. The Forrest Gump. Watch the Forrest Gump movie, Tom Hanks. That is a really good movie to understand this. And there are two movies. There are two movies that Tom Hanks has been in that have a really critical, really essential movies to understand the concept and the perspective of Americans on the military. The first one is Forrest Gump and how he got conscripted or drafted into the military as a ping pong player, right? So, um, and then the whole thing with his captain and all that, and how his captain kind of, they turned into they got out and did the fishing thing and all that, and they turned, got to investing in Apple and all that. So it's a great movie. It's a great movie. The Forrest Gump movie is so good because it understands the whole mentality of the military and where you got to do what you're told thing, and you can be dumb and not be educated and actually get in and it'll get free education. They do get free education, right? So there's a lot that's said in that movie is really good. And a lot of people that they join the military to actually get free education because education is too expensive. We'll get into the education topic in another chapter. But I want to kind of whet our appetites for that because the military is a way, joining the military is a way to get you free education because the free education is too expensive. So we're going to come to that other one too, but that chapter, but it's another, there's all kind of intertwined. It's not just, they're not compartments. They're all intertwined. You've got to see this. So, so there's that part of that military, but that was the Vietnam, whole Forrest Gump is the Vietnam era, right? Well, there's an earlier era where all this became. I should have actually said the Forrest Gump afterwards. I'm sorry, but I don't have this all listed. You got to say it in this order, this linear order, because this is coming up as each of these points are coming pertinent with the films when they actually appeared. Because I saw the Forrest Gump film appear before the Saving Private Ryan. This is actually, I'm saying with the order that they appear in the publication of the films rather than the order that they happen in history. So, Saving Private Ryan, the other Tom Hanks movie, you got to watch that because that tells another perspective of how the Americans see history and military. It's a very deep psychological movie. The whole thing of that, the men that are drafted, conscripted to serve, and then what happens when you've got 3 or 4 of the brothers? Now you got to, they got to go save the one because this is so important to serve in the military. It's so patriotic. It's so important. It's so important that this is sacred this is sacred territory. I mean, this is more sacred than religious territory. It really is. It's so important that and to support your troops. Why every single year in Facebook and LinkedIn and stuff, especially Facebook, it's just every year at Veterans Day, every year the 4th of July, every year, at these points, at certain events in Memorial Day, these 3 events, these 3 holidays are just like spammed with Facebook posts about support your troops, 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 support your troops. And if you say anything against us, if you say anything, if I say anything of just like, if I just say, hey, well, that's a job, some people chose that and some people don't. That you get trashed to pieces. Why? I mean, it's okay to say some people choose the job and some people don't, and you can't actually express your feelings about or your opinion about. I'm not saying when I say, hey, I tell people that you chose to do that. I chose not to. I'm not saying that I don't respect it. I'm just saying I didn't make that choice. I didn't make the choice for a job. And I probably wouldn't make that choice for a job. And I've had opportunity to do it. And I've actually worked on military applications, right? My speech-to-speech translation system. So I did work as a contractor for the U.S. Department of Defense and for the Army Research Lab. I did that too. But I've never got myself, into the Army. And if I did, I'd probably come up with a pretty high level of my degrees and stuff. I'd probably come in at a pretty high level already. It's some kind of officer level, pretty high. But I chose not to do that. But I do have, siblings that have gone through, came in as officers and came in as actual privates. So, and have done that. And I've seen their perspectives too, which align with the rest of the perspectives I'm mentioning. So the whole thing of the support your troops, the military actually, when they're coming, both now the military when you sign up for the military, when you sign up for one of the branches of the armed forces. I can't speak so much to the reserves, but it seems kind of similar. So, and I know I had a colleague, a friend in college, a friend in high school that actually went to the to the academy. So I can't remember the name of the academy. Darn, it's over in the East Coast. Darn, I can't remember the name of it. I got a got a memory hole lapse here. So but that's okay. And then you get the whole Tom Cruise thing. We'll come to the Tom Cruise part of it again. So Tom Cruise, another his movies are kind of helpful to understand a lot of this too. Um, so the whole military thing really took off. The World War One, you know, a lot of people said, why didn't the Americans participate in World War One? Well, it's kind of the Americans were still kind of trying to figure themselves out. Um, they're still coming out of a certain, Industrial Revolution. The beginning of the whole thing, the whole car industry. Got to think of Henry Ford and all that was kind of beginning of. The Wright brothers had just made planes. I mean, they invented the plane, so this is kind of early on, okay? And Americans are still kind of, it takes a boat to get over there, right? We can't fly across the Atlantic yet. It's kind of like it's really early on, and the war's still happening over, elsewhere. So it's really early on to be able to do that. So that's probably why Americans didn't get involved at that point in time as much, and so all the wars still happened, in Europe, and while the men in the trenches got killed off and stuff. So the First World War was really still a European thing. Um, but the Second World War, things had advanced. Now we got planes, got bigger tank. We got tanks now that are bigger. You don't just have these some of the really cool things to go watch in the museums about when the whole thing of having automatic weapons. They actually were actually the beginning ones were crossbows, automatic crossbows and automatic um, arrows. And there's a museum here in Paris. The I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head here, but it's one of the war museums, and they have all these different things of the history, and they show you when these different weapons came into play, and when the whole things that we see these in those old movies about Scotland and England, and we see these. Look at the whole of Lord of the Rings things. I mean, and Narnia films where you see the beginning of the bringing the automatic weapons, but the automatic weapons were the arrow shooters. They were crossbows and arrow shooting things. So the whole world of those films are really helpful to understand at what point those things came into play too. But they're kind of science fiction films, or they're fiction films, right? But they're telling of kind of that kind of the arms that we had at that point in time. But then the Second World War came to play, and that's when we had bigger weapons, more powerful weapons. Uh, we could take boats faster across overseas. We could we could fly, and we had a bomb, a big bomb. At that point in time, and that's when the Americans actually got involved, right? Because the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in December of 1941. And that actually has a very impacting date because I play guitar. Actually, I have a guitar right here. See my guitar? I have a guitar right here. Okay, I got a guitar. I'm in the restaurant. Learned to play a song this morning, so I kind of brought it in. But actually, the Martin guitars, they talk about the pre-war guitars, and pre-war. That whole term pre-war is a whole thing about when was pre-war, and it always reflects to the Second World War. But the pre-war meant before 1943, but actually, 1941. But the whole thing was about. It wasn't about when the war started. The actual thing when you say pre-war guitars, is the war actually started in 1939, right? But the pre-war, 1941 is the date for when we call it a Martin guitar pre-war guitars, because that's when the whether we say the pre-war is because 1941 was not the beginning of the date in the actual war itself. It was when the metal was no longer available to be able to import, or some of the things from Germany, the designs and things were no longer the Martin guitar could no longer import some of the raw materials from Germany, from other countries, to be able to make the guitars. That's what they called pre-war guitars. So 1941 was the date. It was because of the availability of materials to be able to build the guitars. So the whole war thing actually impacts other industries like the guitar industry. So the war is a very important thing for American culture. It has a lot of impact and influence on other things within the American culture that we talk about. Guitars, music is a pretty important thing. And so that's just another anecdote here of how war and this whole thing of military is really ingrained in the culture. And being patriotic, and when you're patriotic, you move all the time. Okay, you move every 3 years. The French, it's like moving every 3 years. Are you crazy? Um, Now, sometimes you get deployed, right? And I know French people get deployed, but I know people who've worked in the French army. They live in the same house for 20, 30 years, 20 years. They lived half their career in the same house. But hey, my brothers and sisters, they got moved every 3 years. Got to move to another place. Got to move to another place. Got to move to, and so it's very mobile. Very mobility is an important thing. You don't have a choice, and if you get to be stationed in the same place twice, you're really kind of lucky. And you get stationed in Hawaii twice, that's like really lucky. Okay, um, but and to be deployed, and actually being sick and not be deployed at all overseas, that's kind of rare, really rare, 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 rare. You had to find ways to get around that one. Um, but the whole thing is you got to move a lot, so that's expected of you. And so the whole family and the whole thing of when you move, when you become part of the military, it's a whole family involvement. Okay, a whole family involvement. That's why you got military brats, because you got a specific term for kids that move around with their families all the time. Just like, they kind of like, they're considered in the third culture kids and fourth culture kids of military brats, missionary kids, MKs, and diplomat children all have similar kinds of traits of identity and issues with identity, or what they are, what they feel that they are. They feel more comfortable in a plane, being in the plane, than they do actually in a country, because they move around so much they don't know where they belong anymore. But the whole military brat thing and the whole military culture thing, I'm talking military culture and supporting. When you're supporting the families, right? It's not just the person's job; it's their life, because they're moving all the time, because their family's moving all the time, and when you actually come in, when you get into the military, the French, the American military, you have a training course, not just for the okay. Now there's basic training. My brother told me all about basic training because he went through it in Chicago. So I mean, and he was going through basic training as my wife and I had moved back from France to the States, and so he wasn't very far away. So we went and picked up, and I got to see him there at basic training, and when we picked up our load of our big van of stuff that we had to go pick up, and we got to talk with him, and here he got to talk about he was getting out, and he was taking a day off, and he's just like telling us all about basic training. It's like, yeah, it's true. You just it's basic training. I mean, go watch Forrest Gump. Watch the movies about go watch. It's that's what it is. So it's very true. And the the thing that comes out of it is that not only do the soldiers, now coming as an officer is a little bit different, but you still kind of have to still do the running at 5 o'clock in the morning. Okay, depending who you are. Even the chaplains got to go run with their troops. Okay, it's pretty tough. It's pretty intense, and the Marines are the level up higher. And then you got to have levels. You got the ready, okay, Navy SEALs. Okay, so I'm not going to go into all these different levels because I'm not an expert on military stuff, but I'm just to know enough to get myself into trouble about it. Okay, I got siblings in it, so. But the thing is that you've got not only are the soldier, not only the something. I'm not talking about being drafted here. I'm talking about being, you are being signing up, and that's it. to 5-year deal. In a lot of it, actually, you get education. And I'm not saying they come in as officer means that you've already got the education, right? If you sign up as a soldier, um, I'm not going to say so. I'm going to say soldier in general because you've got different names for these and different, if you're the army, military, you got different branches. Okay, so I'm not going to get into all this. But if you come in at the private level, you are you're doing it usually for education, so you can get free money to the free education out of it. It tends to be the Forrest Gump situation, right? So Bubba and all that stuff in Forrest, right? So so there's this whole thing, but when you move around your family and stuff, it's not only the soldier that goes through this. These spouses go through the same brainwashing, and I'm going to say this brainwashing. Okay, um, yes, it is, because they must also be able to reflect the military. They must be representatives of the military, the armed forces, and they're expected to also have a code of conduct. And what's actually really important to understand here is, and some people don't understand, is that actually the military, you can't get divorced. Okay? I mean, it's kind of, it's a no-no. Okay? Whereas, like the French say, hey, whatever, it's whatever your private life. Well, not quite the military, okay? I want to challenge that here. Got to think about that. Think about that, because this is kind of deep here about that. There's what's allowed and what's not allowed. So it's a very controlling thing. Very controlling thing. So you actually, when you join the military, you have rendered your entire life over to. Now that's kind of weird, right? Wow, don't we talk about like other countries like being controlled, Putin, and there's the dictators in North Korea and stuff. Boy, well, American military, really? I mean, you're just a little chess piece, and your family are chess pieces, and you're moved around, and you don't have no say. You don't have to say what you want, till you get kind of high in the ranks. You can kind of help decide where you're going to get deployed, but you're still kind of chess pieces. And it's a 20-year deal. Once you do the 20 years, 18 years, you get to go retired. So it's like, I mean, who else gets full benefits and stuff when they get out, after 20 years? Nobody. I mean, everybody else in regular jobs and stuff. Hey, you got to put 30, 30, 40 years in. Come on. Military have it have it easy in that. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying you got to make an investment. You got to actually sacrifice your entire family life for like 20 years to do this. So that's why you get the good deal out of it. So you get the education for free, partially, if you join as that. But you gotta go be deployed several times, and you gotta be going, not being with your family and stuff, and being deployed for 9 months on a boat or somewhere, or in some ship or something, or in some other place, or you're in Afghanistan. Yeah, I've seen this. Not being with your family. Whereas other countries say, who would be stupid enough to do that, to make people not be with their family for a year and stuff, and their kids not seeing their family, their parents. But see, Americans are into, we have sacrificed. We have sacrificed. This is for our country. For our country. It's really ingrained. It's really ingrained in the DNA. I'm sorry, of the DNA of Americans. That's why pro-military and pro-troop and pro is so important, because we got to, our troops our men, now women, okay, have sacrificed their lives and their families for being. I mean, really, it's not even. It's kind of like the missionaries. The missionaries kind of did the same thing. They sacrificed to go do it too, and you got to support. Very similarities between missionaries and actually military. Very similar approach. And the churches are how churches see missionaries, and how they support them, and how Americans should support the military. Very similar traits. Um, and so you got to be. I'm going to say brainwashed. I'm going to say it. I'm being very I've made that choice to make that word, because you are taught to say what you got to live, and you got to respect, and what you must live by to be able to be a good military um, participant, and to be a spouse or a family member of a military participant. Okay, active. And this affects the whole family, and people actually move around. They actually know each other. They actually meet up with each other, and they become they become friends within their military circles because they get positioned and stationed in different places every 3 years, and they might come back and get stationed together. Your friends are actually the other military folks because you're moving around so much. And it's hard to actually have friends in the places you live because you live on a base or live close to the base. And for your actual friendships are built around the people in the military. This is really deep stuff. Whereas, gee, I know that countries don't move so much and stuff. You get your friends are in the local, the local neighborhoods and stuff. Right now in the military, they're in the military. It's the friends you're military, and you're all military. It's this bubble. It's called the military ecosystem, the military family ecosystem. Um, people that don't aren't part of it don't understand it. People from the countries don't understand this, and that's why it's so important. And so it's a whole sacrifice, right? Um, Now, people, please feel free to disagree with me, but please feel to kind of give some justification, some proof that what I'm saying is not right. Because as I begin to see this over time, and begin to understand it more and more and more, and how much why I'm glad I never got into that. I did um, for a number of reasons, but the so that's the whole sacrifice thing, the whole patriotic thing, and why you must pro troop on at least 3 holidays per year. You got to support your troops, and if you don't, then you're an anti-troop person. Okay, again, we're talking about that trait, plus or minus, plus or minus. And I've been blamed for this, saying, "Oh, you fled to France." What does that sound like? All those Americans that fled to Canada, that. So I've been blamed by being the. I said at one point in time, say, hey, you chose to you chose to go do this military thing, and you're halfway. At a point in time, I said to the person, hey, you're halfway through. You're making a decision. You want to do the other half again, do another half to kind of. But you're sacrificing so much and making all these sacrifices. And I said to the person, you're expecting me to actually thank you for the sacrifices you're making. And I said, no. I mean, I just basically said, it was your choice to go into the military, your choice to make that decision. You knew what you were getting into. And now, halfway through, you're kind of thinking about it. And then you want my support to be able to help you in your decision, to encourage you to do the other half of the thing till retirement. And I basically said to the person, I said, look, I made my choice differently. I wouldn't do something else. I decided not to do that. I decided to kind of work in industry and go to another country and live elsewhere and stuff. And I was just giving my opinion. I wasn't, saying that they were wrong. I just chose a different path. And bam, I just got slammed with that one. Just like, I got kicked out of the person's house just by saying this, by even daring to say, you made a different choice. We just made different choices. We're just different people, and we chose different paths. But the fact that I wasn't supporting the person in pro-military, pro-troop, which I'm not saying I'm anti-troop. I'm just saying that I didn't choose that path myself. And I get kind of blamed with this whole, you fled to France, and that's like saying I'm this person that fled to Canada in the Second World War, right? But see, in France and other countries, you got this third flavor. So for the Americans, it's this pro or you're against, right? Again, binary trait, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, on, off, black or white. You don't have kind of a gray color. I kind of joke about this sometimes. You don't have like a Michael Jackson color. You're in between. You don't know what it is. No man's land. Okay, let's call this no man's land. Um, um, there's no man's land, and what we call it, no man's land is called a conscientious objector, right? But you don't have that. But see, in France, you do, and other countries you do, and you do just more. You don't do military service. Well, actually, you can. There are other countries you have to do military. So I've heard about Taiwan does it too. You can actually defer your military service by being in school and stuff, and being things and doing certain things, and actually getting jobs. And you can defer your military service, but the goal of them is to defer your military service as far as you can. France actually got rid of the whole obligatory military service in about 2000. In that period of time, because I was actually in a new job, and we had the kind of the first generation of the kids that didn't have to do the military. So it was about 2000 to 2003, about that period of time. So they got rid of the military service concept, where if you didn't do your military service, which was 10 months, you did have to do a 20-month stint in some kind of conscious, conscientious objector kind of role for serving in some kind of way to the country. In some other way. Some people go off and do teaching in another country and where you did their military or whatever. Some people do all kinds. You can do all kinds of different things. And I have lots of friends that actually did this. They're the age of my parents, and they actually did this kind of this alternative thing. So that's a very big difference to some of the in 2000, where we've got these young people that are that are actually the young children of these people that are grandparents kind of age right now. Um, that whole range of people that have been this whole option that you could do. This doesn't really exist in America. You're for it or against it. You don't have this kind of, well, because we never actually had military service, obligatory military service. You didn't have this option to actually create this third flavor. And allow people to be able to do something else and to not have the opportunity to be able to say, well, I kind of have a different opinion. I don't quite fit into this on or off 0-1 kind of thing. I fit into another category. And we're going to see this. We're going to see this trend on other things too, where you got to be one or the other of a trait, plus or minus. So this one was the plus, support your troops or not support your troops. And we've seen how this comes out in different places at different times of the year. And 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 then I'll just bring up now the last point here in this whole troop thing. And this is part of, see, this is the whole thing of the troops part. Then you have the whole thing of the military enterprise, which is another thing. It's a related, very related, but different. And all I can say is that I really identified with the movie Iron Man 1 with Tony Stark, and when he awoke with the whole getting captured in, I can't remember if it was Iran or Afghanistan or wherever it was, and then have to get out, and he had seen what all his own weapons had actually been used to be sold to the countries where he thought that his weapons are being used to attack. So then he decided to kind of turn around his whole business and his whole company and make it an anti, do not serve the military anymore. Don't give it to the military. And then he has this whole conflict with the military because the military want his weapons that he's actually creating, right? They want his things that he's actually making, right? And his whole thing is now getting away, not being involved with that anymore, right? And he is a really good example, but he's still protecting. He's just protecting a different way, right? And the whole 3 movies are about that. No, 3 movies plus the Avengers movies. So those movies are actually very helpful to understand too. Not the American point of view, but actually what happens when someone else kind of wakes up to well, I can't be involved in this anymore because I don't believe in it thing. And what do they do and how they going to get around it? And but they have to be involved and all the things they have to deal to do that. All those Iron Man and Avengers movies on the Iron Man part of it is a really good thing. And then you see the Captain America part of it too. See what Captain America, he kind of woke up to some things too, right? In those Avengers movies. Really interesting movies because they help us see some things. And then the Avengers movies actually have some because you have wisdom. The Hawk guy that flies too. There's all those kind of movies too. So there's a lot of that. And then I'll come to, I thought this was going to be the last point. There's another point. Sorry, but I'm continuing to think about those. A lot of these movies help me think about these things. The whole movie, the Tom Cruise movies. Now, the Tom Cruise movies, there are several of them. The whole Top Gun movie was a good one to see how things in the military happen and can be perceived. And then there's the series of the Mission Impossible, Ethan Hunt, which is actually the modern series because you have the whole actually the whole earlier movies with Peter Graves' name, And then you have the ones before that. I actually have the old Mission Impossible, I have the four stack of 40 of this video, the 40 ones, the original ones. I love those. But see, that's the kind of whole Mission Impossible and kind of CIA stuff, and that's a whole another realm of this thing too. Um, some of the other ones too that are really interesting. The whole Jack Bauer 24 Hours. Um, the 24-hour series is really good because I think that really helps understand the politics of the CIA, the FBI, um, how that happens. And I know people in the CIA. Um, they don't have business cards, so they can't talk about what they're doing. And because of the technologies I work on are, they want. So I know that. And I've had people, you know, come to me for wanting me for me to work on their technologies. Okay. Um, in projects and outside of projects. So I know what they're looking for. I know the things, and I know what they're kind of expecting. And there's always this kind of pro-military, and you must give to this enterprise. You must participate in this. I mean, I don't want to say threatened, but you must do this because you're American. I'm saying it has, um, and 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 I have perceived that having lived out of America for a long period of time, to perceive that. Well, I wasn't the only one because there are people that were actually inside America that were in the meetings too, and they were just kind of like, you're saying this to us, you must do this stuff. It's very yeah. There's a whole thing of playing on this support your troops. You must support your troops, and so you must support your troops, and so you must support the military enterprise. Okay, and I'm not judging that. I'm not judging it because I think that I do believe that the military enterprise. I do believe that the military is a necessary thing. Okay, I do believe that. I think that you have to have a defense. If you have nothing, then you're just gonna you're open to getting yourself wiped out. So, but I'm not saying that it needs to be offensive all the time. Different countries do this differently. Um, I'm kind of making some statements in this book too about my statements about what I believe as an American has really thought about this because I've been thinking about this as I kind of make my evaluation of this whole book and how this fits as a piece in the book of all these different parts, right? Um, and I'm kind of making some statements about where I stand on it. And if I had to make a decision now, if I had to participate in some of these projects where I have been involved in the past, of the language technology I did for the U.S. Department of Defense and all that, what if I had to make the decision today, even with all the skills I had back then, and they wanted me for, would I do it today? Would I do it again today? Today, if I had the same offer and I was the only person on the planet, which I was at the time, to be able to do that, would I do that again today as an American? Okay? I don't know. I don't know. But I see how the Americans we use that to make things happen. We use that to persuade people to participate in things. And we use that it can get into a sense of guilt. We can use that as a sense of guilt that you must do this because you're American and because you need to believe in you need to put in the pro support, the pro troop support, and all that stuff. That plays into it. And I have not seen this in my 30 years in France. And I can say that for my in-laws, who the majority of them are in military and police, okay, I can say that. I've never seen this. Never seen this in 30 years. Okay, 30 years of any of my in-laws. I've never or felt or witnessed or been impacted by this with the family of that. I think it's that you've got to do this. You got to do this way, and you must support this. People accept if you don't have the same opinion. Um, but the Americans have a kind of a certain way of you have to believe in this. So that's the chapter on the values of pro and plus or minus pro support the military. And I gave a bunch of anecdotes. Again, I'm not I'm not saying that I'm against or for any of this. I'm saying I'm explaining it. And I've indicated a little bit of where I stand on it. But that's just reflecting because I'm thinking that how I perceive this too, after a lot of reflection and a lot of deep no, thinking about this. This is not something I just kind of decided, over a week of thinking. This is 3 decades of thinking about it and perceiving and watching and seeing and really doing some soul searching on this, and knowing the history too. I know about the history. I showed that I've known enough the history to get myself into a lot of trouble, okay, and out of a lot of it too. Um, and I've been in situations where I avoid this topic talking about it now as much as I can. But I'm actually coming out and making statements now, especially with the whole Putin thing right now, because I think that we're seeing some of the same kind of traits coming up, and I did, some of the languages I was working on and some of the things I was working on for Korean languages. I was working on Korean language translation systems because of Korea. Okay. And I was working on, started the Arabic system because of, the whole, uh, actually, it was right before 9/11. It was right before 9/11. So they were foreseeing some of the hot languages. The ban of 9/11 happened after I had actually moved away and gone back. So if I had been there, actually during the 9/11, I would have been, bam, I would have actually been on that project again, working in the military stuff. But I wasn't when they closed it down. So I had actually I had actually left right before I left in 1998. And so yeah, so I would have been, but I was working in the wrong languages in the wrong place at the wrong time to be able to do that again. So, um, but that project would have actually kicked off again if I had been there. No problem, no doubt. If I'd continued on doing what I was doing and probably hadn't come back to France and lived back in France and stuff. But so this is these are and everything I'm mentioning here, I am avoiding mentioning names because I'm doing my best to do this. You can actually go probably watch some of the videos, the books, or the things I've cited, or some of my papers that I've cited because I had to say at certain articles, I'd say who is supporting me financially, specific. Actually, in some of my papers, I actually had to say people's names to thank them for certain things. So if you want to go read all those papers and all those conference papers and watch my videos of certain things where I mention people, you can find who they are. But none of you is going to go do that, right? So that's all deep together. And I'm not going to tell you where those articles and things are. You got to go read them all. So and watch them all. So if you want to find it, so I'm not going to make it. I'm going to hide. I'm not trying to hide it. I'm just saying you got to go find it if you want to see names of people and stuff, or names of certain departments that were funding me or whatever. See names of people because they happen to be mentioned in the video that I gave a talk or something. Okay, so I'm not going to go point them out. I'm not going to shout out to them or call them out. Nothing here because that's. But I'm just. I've been involved enough to know it well enough. Okay. And I'm not saying you have to believe in everything I do. You have to trust me if they say, no, go do your own research and stuff. I encourage you to do that. But this is the experience I've had for 30-ish years, and and how I've gone through it and how I navigate through that situation of being an American and being in a category that is not quite in the plus or minus. Okay, I'm kind of in that. Well, we're kind of in a. Well, it's neither. What is it? Because I do have like brother and my brother and sister. When my brother, I know when I've been out to the bases where he's at and stuff, and he says, "Yeah, my brother here, he's the one that made that little translation system, it's like that thing that we see, that walkie-talkie that's multilingual, and he makes those things for us, kind of stuff." I've had siblings that were very happy and content to be able to tell their friends in the military, friends, family, the military family, that I was the one that was actually supporting them. They were very proud of that at a time where I was probably less proud of it. And yes, I could have, been gone to when I went to the Defense Language Institute. I was actually, one of my siblings was at the Defense Language Institute actually while I was go visiting family there for other reasons. And I could have actually gone and probably easily gotten to go talk at the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, you know, to talk about the system that had been built, a, a decade before or whatever it was at that point in time. I can't remember the actual how long before, but I chose not to do it. I chose not to do that because it wasn't how I was there. wasn't why I was there. And if I had gone, 10 years, 15, 10 or 15 years before, that would have been the first thing on my list is to go talk with high level ups and talk about the stuff I was working on to help collaborate. But after about a decade, I began to kind of think about it. So that's, you know, again, and these are people evolve. They change, they evolve, they figure out where they are in this life, and sometimes things change for in different reasons. So so hopefully you've gotten something out of this one, and hopefully you've got something to think about deeper. And feel free to challenge me about some of the points. I have no problem with that. Feel free to bring up other opinions and other anecdotes that maybe contradict what I'm saying. It's okay. It's fine. I'll learn something more. I'm just trying to share as many anecdotes and examples as I can with as many references that I feel that I can share, without I'm trying to deal with kind of the whole GDPR and personal data and mentioning names and stuff. I'm trying to avoid that. So I'm trying to avoid all that. But I'm trying to mention, published stuff when I can mention the published stuff and all that, which I've done. So, um, and all my articles, there's a list of publications. So it's all up in my LinkedIn profile. You just go there, download the most recent one. And if you go read my publications where I talk about some of these things and go to them. And there's a bunch of videos I've made on other things about the systems I built in this past too. So there are some videos about that, which summarize a lot of the articles too, but they don't go into all the details. So that kind of, I hope this gives the whole thing. Sorry it's taking you all. These are chapters of book, okay? These are not little 5-minute pitches. I'm explaining what I would do in a book, and it's about the length of a book, a chapter. So thanks for your time. Thanks for your listening time. Thanks for your comments and feedback. That's the nice thing about this kind of video book. You can give comments and feedback. So, and I do check my YouTube channel, the comments, and I do respond to them. Um, Please be, attacking people is not a good thing to do. Do it in a constructive way. Uh, you know, because that I like to respond to constructive criticism. I do, and I try to do that as much as I can. But try to reflect that constructive aspects. Even if you disagree, it's okay. It's fine. It's fine. Just try to be constructive about it. And let's go on to the next chapter because boy, I'm loving these chapters. These are great because they're a reflection of a long thought process. Not just thoughts. It's life too. It's as we go on. Thank you so much.